Somewhere in the turquoise water off the Bahamas, a woman named Lynette Hooker vanished one night in early April. And nearly 4 months later, nobody can say for certain what really happened to her. What we do know is unsettling enough on its own. What we don't know is what's kept this case alive in headlines ever since. Here's the story as her husband first told it. Brian and Lynette Hooker had been sailing together for years, cruising the Bahamas on their yacht, Soulmate. On the night of April 4th, the couple took their small dinghy out from Elbow Cay, heading back toward the boat. According to Brian, the water turned rough, Lynette lost her balance, and she went overboard, taking the ignition key with her. Without power, he says he had no choice but to paddle back to shore alone, arriving hours later to raise the alarm. It's a tragic story. It's also a story that started falling apart almost immediately. For one thing, the weather that night wasn't rough at all. Multiple accounts, along with footage from the area, describe calm seas, not the churning waves Brian described. For another, the math doesn't add up. Experienced sailors, local boat captains, and search and rescue professionals have all questioned how paddling back to shore could possibly take as long as Brian claimed it did. And then there's the GPS data. Investigators say location data, pulled from an electronic device, tells a different story than the one Brian gave authorities, raising the first real red flag in the case. Brian was taken into custody by Bahamian police just days after reporting Lynette missing. He was held in question for several days before being released without being charged. He has never wavered from denying any wrongdoing, and his attorney has repeatedly said the same. But the U.S. Coast Guard didn't walk away. Instead, they opened a full federal investigation and eventually confirmed something striking. This is officially being treated as a possible murder case. Since then, the physical evidence has piled up. The Coast Guard seized the Soulmate, the sailboat itself, hauling it back to Florida for forensic examination. Weeks later, they went back for the dinghy too, the same 8-foot boat at the center of Brian's original story, pulling it out of Bahamian waters for testing. Investigators have brought in cadaver dogs. They've sent divers into the water near where the couple was sailing. And now, sources close to the family say something even more significant is on the table. That Lynette may never have actually fallen off that dinghy at all. Instead, investigators are exploring the possibility that she made it back onto the sailboat that night, and that whatever happened to her happened there, not in the open water. If that's true, it changes everything. It means the entire foundation of Brian's story, the deserted dinghy ride, the missing key, the desperate solo paddle back to shore, may have been built to explain something else entirely. Investigators are reportedly also looking into whether there was a physical altercation aboard the Soulmate that night. None of this has been confirmed as fact, and no charges have been filed. But it's clearly the direction the investigation has taken. Lynette's family hasn't stayed quiet either. Her mother, Darlene Hamlet, has publicly said she believes her daughter made it back to the boat, and that foul play was involved. She said she's limited in what she can share publicly, but she's made her belief clear. Lynette's daughter has gone further, telling reporters that her mother once confided that Brian had threatened to throw her overboard during a heated argument back in 2024. There's also an older police report from 2015 describing a physical altercation between the couple, though at the time, prosecutors said there wasn't enough evidence to determine who started it, and no charges were ever filed. Taken on their own, none of these things prove anything. Taken together, they've clearly shaped how investigators and the public are looking at Brian Hooker. So what happens next? A lot of it comes down to something we haven't seen yet. The statements Brian originally gave to Bahamian police in the very first days after Lynette disappeared. Those early accounts, given before anyone realized just how much scrutiny this case would attract, could be some of the most valuable evidence investigators have. The problem is, those records are still sitting with Bahamian authorities, months after Lynette vanished, and they haven't yet been handed over to U.S. investigators. That delay hasn't stopped comparisons to another case that shocked the country a decade ago. Back in 2016, a young man named Nathan Carmen went out fishing with his mother off the coast of Rhode Island. Their boat sank. He turned up alive in a life raft a week later, seemingly unscathed, while his mother was never found. At first, it looked like a miracle rescue. Then investigators noticed something odd. Nathan's story kept shifting. He told his aunt the boat sank at night. Later, he told the Coast Guard it sank in broad daylight. Small inconsistency? Maybe. Except drift patterns, purchase records, and even a bucket of bait left behind in his truck all pointed the same direction. Something didn't add up. Eventually, federal investigators built a case using something surprisingly unglamorous. Not a smoking gun, but years of patient digital forensics. Emails, text messages, photos pulled off old computers, financial records, spending patterns, a timeline built piece by piece, almost like assembling a puzzle with no picture on the box. Nathan Carman was eventually charged in an 8-count federal indictment, accused of murder on the high seas along with fraud, tied to a family inheritance he stood to gain once his mother, and earlier his grandfather, were both gone. He took his own life in jail in 2023 before ever standing trial. The lead investigator on that case, a retired federal agent who spent decades working exactly this kind of investigation, says the parallels to the Hooker case caught his attention almost immediately. In both cases, there's only one witness left to describe what happened at sea. In both cases, that witness gave an account that didn't match the physical evidence. In both cases, family members raised doubts almost right away. And in both cases, the person at the center of it all seemingly never expected a federal agency to get involved, let alone build a case this thorough. But he's also careful not to jump ahead of the evidence. A shifting story or an implausible explanation isn't the same thing as proof, he says. Prosecutors need more than doubt. They need a case that can survive a courtroom. And that takes time, patience, and a mountain of technical work most people never see. In the Carman case, that meant years of digital forensics before charges were ever filed. In the Hooker case, investigators are almost certainly doing the same thing right now, working through data pulled from phones, laptops, and any onboard electronics recovered from the soulmate, hoping the technology fills in gaps that human memory or human honesty hasn't. There are still big questions nobody can answer yet. Investigators haven't said publicly whether they've pinpointed exactly when Lynette died, though some reports suggest they may have narrowed it down. Nobody outside the investigation knows for certain what evidence they've pulled from electronic devices on board, whether that includes anything from smartwatch, phone, or the boat's own systems, or what any of it might show. And nobody knows what happened to Lynette's body, why it hasn't been found, or whether it ever will be. These are confirmed facts. They're the open questions this investigation still has to answer, the same way investigators in the Carman case spent years chasing down leads before they had anything close to a complete picture. What's clear is this: a woman is missing. Her family believes she didn't simply fall into the sea. Federal investigators have taken the unusual and serious step of treating this as a potential murder case, seizing boats, sending in dive teams, and pulling in forensic labs usually reserved for the country's most serious crimes. And the man who was the last person to see her alive has told a story that keeps failing to match the evidence in front of investigators. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. He continues to deny any wrongdoing, and under the law, he's entitled to that presumption until, and unless, prosecutors prove otherwise. But cases like this rarely move quickly, and rarely move quietly either. If the pattern from Rhode Island a decade ago holds true here, the answers won't come from a single dramatic reveal. They'll come slowly, from data, from records, from statements compared against each other line by line, until eventually, the full picture either confirms an accident or reveals something far darker. Until then, a family waits, a case builds in the background, and the waters off the Bahamas keep whatever secrets they're still holding.